Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League, where Larne have returned to the summit of the Premiership after Linfield failed to keep pace once again after a last-gasp Prendergast equaliser at Mornview left the Blues with only 1 point in 2 league games. Can they respond now that Larne are in pole position for the Gibson Cup? And we ask, how did the Belfast club let all those points slip away? Cliftonville, they aren't out of this just yet after they held up their end of the bargain during a busy week which saw a rapturous Casey leveller at the Oval be followed up by a thumping of Coleraine at Solitude. You know the score by now. We're going to review all of the action in the Nifl Premiership over the past few days, as well as look ahead to this weekend's games in your latest weekly edition of Kicking Match. Unlike the games over the weekend, I hope we're going to start this podcast off strong, keep the fire burning throughout, and not leave all the good bits to the last 10 minutes. Look, I love a little bit of late drama as much as the next guy, but you know, this is an Irish League podcast, not an Irish League game, so hopefully I can deliver you entertainment from bell to bell, or from whistle to whistle. In fact, I hope I can deliver 2 entertaining podcasts to you this week. As some of you may have noticed, if you haven't already, I actually delivered a little bonus episode of the podcast this week. At the very start, I dropped the second annual guide to the League of Ireland. I got on the digital blower to Kieran Burke, who is a podcaster who chats all about the League of Ireland as the season is kicking off this weekend, and I had the chance to ask him all the questions you may have about the forthcoming season, including who the runners and riders are, as well as what their thoughts may have been about that big multi-million pound proposal for an all-island league that was shot down. So you can go check that out, but obviously not now. Do it afterwards if you have time, because you are knee-deep in already in this week's edition of Kick a Match, your flagship show where we're going to go through all the games. And here to talk through it all, it is former sports editor of the Ballymena Times. It's good to welcome back Stephen Alexander.
Hi Peter, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I always book my guests usually before the weekend, and some games maybe aren't as thrilling. And I mean, if you weren't there to the very end for all those games, you must have missed some incredible drama. Really fun and unique weekend of Irish League football. We now broadly are looking at the final 10 games. Can you believe we're already at that point in the season?
Absolutely scary, Peter, to think that we're at that stage. I actually sort of had to sort of almost pinch myself when I looked at the league table and I saw teams having played 27, 28 games now. I'm thinking, blimey, I can really remember back to like a sunny weekend at the start of August, and honestly, it does not seem a long time ago at all. It has flown in up until this point, and hopefully the best of it is still to come as well.
I do not doubt that there is. And, you know, you look at those 10 games, which will be split, 5 pre and 5 post split. And I mean, for some of these teams, they're looking at it like we've got X amount of games to go. We've got to go into this and try and get as high as possible. Some are looking at it going, we need to deal with all these as they come, and hopefully we'll get in the position that we want to be. For 2 teams in particular, I think they're looking at 10 games and they're thinking, we are running out of runway. They met together on Friday night. It was the battle of the basement between Newry City and Ballymena. It was at the Newry Showgrounds. Both teams coming off losses in the Irish Cup. But this game was the big one. It was the important one. There was 6 points between the sides before they met. And at the end of the final whistle, 6 points remained. One side will be slightly happier than the other, and it's the home side. They get that point, get themselves out of a rut, relatively. And for Jim Irvin, the Ballymena United manager, he was very clear about it. This was 2 points lost in his eyes. And for him and many of the followers of the men in Sky Blue, they'll not want to look back and regret this evening.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, I think probably even watching that game on TV, you could absolutely just sense the tension in that game, really. Even by the way, sort of the sides, both sides look nervy. On the face of it, probably, you might say a point's not a disastrous result for Ballymena. Probably a better point for Ballymena than it was for Newry. But having said that, in the context of the match itself, I fully agree with Jim's assessment of it. I think that Ballymena basically did give Newry a point by the end of it. I think Ballymena looked the better side. I think they created the better chances. And it must have been just incredibly frustrating for Jim to see Ballymena work so hard to finally get in front with, what was it, 16, 17 minutes left, and then to concede a goal, and especially, Peter, a goal of that nature just a few minutes later. I think, at any level of football, that was a bad goal to concede. Like a free header from a corner. Adam Sally is very decent in the air, as we've seen. He's scored a few good goals from headers this season. Noah Stewart had come on as a sub, and more or less his first involvement was to score a goal. There's a real sort of clamour among a lot of Ballymena supporters that they would like to see Noah Stewart start in games. So he looks to have a real genuine goal threat about him. But obviously, he's 19 years old. He's still in his first season at this level. Jim clearly feels he's getting more out of him as an impact sub at this present time.
I'm going to have to agree with you there on the statement that Ballymena were the better side. I thought they played the better football. They looked the more assured up until the point they got past that imaginary 18-yard line, because once they got in the box, it felt like it was panic, it was indecision, it was snapshots that were never really going to go anywhere. Look, they hit the bar in the first half and they pushed and pushed and pushed. Newry were happy to try and soak that up as much as there was plenty of dangerous balls flying at their goalkeeper Mitchell. But they wanted to counter, and you could see them trying to play balls out wide and attack. And, they came close, but after all that huffing and puffing, Ballymena finally get that goal. They have the lead. But of course, Newry go straight down the pitch almost and get a goal back straight away. And that is absolutely the disappointing thing here for Ballymena, because if they win in this game, it creates such daylight between them and Newry. It's going to take a big run from Newry, which we haven't seen at all this season, and it would also take a big capitulation from Ballymena to let that fade. There's no doubting for Ballymena fans, 11th is pretty scary as well, and they don't want to face that, but ultimately they don't have that luxury to try and poo-poo that position. They still haven't been able to put Newry to bed. There was an absolute chance there. Now for Newry, they'll have to take that 1-1 as a positive, because what they do have now is they still have a game in hand, and they have that opportunity this coming week against Loughgall, and that's where the swing can be, where that game against Loughgall is going to be a really competitive game, where I think Loughgall will ultimately be the favourites there. But if Newry can swing a win there, 28 games played each, it's 3 points the difference, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel like Newry are down and out. So to a certain extent, this draw has given Newry what they'll feel is the springboard, and I imagine that's probably the biggest disappointment around here, where that felt like a somewhat of it was a moral victory, but it was a good one for the headspace of Newry City.
Yeah, very much so. I think, as you say there, if Newry can somehow claw that lead back to the deficit, I should say, to 3 points. I actually think, Peter, there you touched upon it. Ballymena have actually passed up a couple of really good chances to pull away from Newry in recent weeks. If you cast your mind back a couple of weeks ago, Newry lost at Larne on the Friday night. Ballymena were at home to Loughgall on the Saturday. That looked like a realistic chance for Ballymena to extend that gap to move to 7 or maybe even to 9 points over Newry. But they blew it that day by losing at home. And it was a similar situation on Friday night, where again, had Ballymena been able to hold on, the gap would have been out to 9. And as you say, it's starting to look a bit bleak for Newry at that stage. But they're 6 points behind, a couple of wins. The difficulty, I think, whereas if you look at it maybe earlier on in the season, say somebody like Glenavon, who were struggling at that time when Steve McDonnell came in, all of a sudden Glenavon won 5 in the spin, and that's it. That's enough this season to ensure that Glenavon were safe, because the reality is I just can't see a Ballymena or a Newry putting together that sort of a run of 4 or 5 wins on the bounce.
We are looking like, and it's looking more likely that this is our bottom 2, and with that means there's a really big trapdoor, and then there is at least a safety rope. But what that really means, well, it depends on what they can do in that playoff. So I think, once again, the continued big winners from that result is actually the sides above them, where Dungannon have flashed, but they haven't got the points total up. Their performances have probably looked like they've given them. The rest of the teams you were talking about there, Glenavon are safe, Loughgall are pretty much safe, Carrick are safe, Coleraine aren't going to drop no matter how bad their form goes. So it looks as though, unless Dungannon don't get these points, they're going to get caught. And if they are going to get caught, one of these teams are going to blow it away. Looking at these two teams here, I think we know about some of the Newry City alterations. We know about Connor Mitchell coming in. You have Stephen Ball coming in. Brandon Doyle was late in the window, now kind of playing up top for them. For Ballymena, particularly compared to the start of the season, I know this was a team who had a few alterations and was like Jim Irvin's first start, and then the second window he could understood his team a bit better and he can add a few names. You're looking at it and I see the likes of Dylan Boyle, Sean Brown. I know Calvin McCurry was a transfer in, Dahi McCallion, Noah Stewart's been this player who's emerged. I mean, to a certain extent, Jim has had to alter this team and try and find a bit of form and make it work. Can you tell me anything about those players who perhaps fans of other teams in the league might not know that much about?
Yeah, well, I mean, once again, Peter, Ballymena have had to deal very heavily in the loan market in January. You mentioned a couple of them there. Sean Brown is on loan from Larne. I thought he had a really, really good game on Friday night. I've seen him a few times since he arrived, really up and down that right flank as he has been in the game so far. Like, I think Larne have handled his development really well, because first half of the season he was out on loan at Bangor, playing in the Championship. They brought him back whenever that loan deal finished in January. Now they've given him the opportunity to see how he gets on in the Premiership with Ballymena. So from what I've seen of him so far, it looks as though he could fit very nicely into the role that Tomas Cosgrove plays at Larne. A lot of very similar attributes and how you can get up and down that right flank and put crosses in. The only thing is, I would imagine there's still a fair bit of mileage in Tomas yet at Larne there. I think there's still a few years left in him. Ballymena in the loan market, Jamie Robinson in from Cliftonville. It's been sort of fairly obvious from early in the season when Colin Coates suffered that awful injury, which I would imagine will end his involvement this season. I think the centre of defence was certainly an area that Ballymena had to strengthen, so they moved in for Jamie Robinson there. Daffy McCallion, who you mentioned there, he had arrived as well just late on from Derry City, again to try and strengthen the defence there. Probably particularly disappointing for Jim that a number of the players that he signed in the summer, he's then had to move on in January, because in a lot of cases they maybe didn't do the job that Jim had hoped. So that must be frustrating as well. He's come in the summer and he's had to sort of rebuild a team, and then come January he's almost had to rebuild his own team again. So there's been a fair bit of transfer activity there, but unfortunately, Peter, the players have come and gone. The personnel has maybe changed. The one problem that's persisted all season has been that chronic lack of goals. Only good thing I can possibly see, and Jim has touched upon it himself there. In recent weeks, Ballymena have been maybe creating more chances and not putting them away, whereas before they weren't creating chances at all. But 18 goals in 28 league games tells its own story, really. I think any other season, a team that had scored so few goals could well have been cut adrift at the bottom of the table. So, in a sense, it's remarkable that there is still a team below Ballymena in the table when they've scored so few goals. And then, obviously, both teams are very much fighting for their lives at this stage.
I would agree with you. There is flashbacks for the Ballymena side of that Portadown team who brought in a lot of names, and the one thing they couldn't get is a goal. And the difference, I guess, we saw there, and it obviously didn't end well for Portadown, but they actually went to Ballymena to get a few of those players that got them the goals, So, Ballymena, you name all those players, Jimmy Robinson, Sean Brown, Dave Callion, these are not well-known Irish League players. They are young, unproven top-level players that Jim is starting and trying to get the entire club's survival in the league it hangs on them now. And look, they're delivering solid football. And I think if you can get the confidence of Johnny McMurray up, he should get the goals to at least stave away 12th. And now, regardless of whatever team does finish 11th, I'm sure the big concern might be anybody that's looking at this championship. There is just this mad scramble between Dundela, Bangor, Institute, and Portadown for automatic promotions, the key aim for all of them. But second place is also a viable option into the league. I mean, they all look like they're playing with confidence. A number of them have gone deep in cup competitions, and feels like more than ever. I could name you any of those teams, and I think they could really give either one of these teams a game. And I think the confidence level, a team who both these teams have conceded a lot, haven't scored a lot, and they go against teams who might not have perceived experience or skill level of the players that they have, but I mean, they have all the confidence and will play with no fear. It could really be a dangerous game for either one if they do sneak 11th.
I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that, Peter. There, I think that the difficulty is now. I think realistically, if you're Newry or Ballymena, you're looking at filling those bottom two positions because you're looking above that. Well, as we speak, there's 6 points between Newry and Ballymena. Then there's still a large gap between Ballymena and Dungannon above them. So I think Newry and Ballymena, you are looking at the two teams who will finish in 11th and 12th. Obviously, one of them's going to be relegated automatically. But as you've touched upon there, Peter, you wouldn't be hugely confident or certainly overly confident for the chances of the team that's in the playoff. I think this year's championship is particularly strong. You look at that, look at the standard of some of the signings that those leading championship clubs made in January. You know that just to see how serious these clubs are about trying to get promotion. You know, you think about Bangor signing the likes of Conor McDermott, Institute signing Michael Kennedy and Daniel Lafferty, among others. Portadown made a number of signings from within the championship itself. And, you know, they'll be massively keen, obviously, to get back into the top flight as well. So, no, a huge test awaits in the playoffs for whoever finishes 11th in the Premiership.
Well, it'll be up to them to try and battle their way through. And I think that game on Tuesday could be massive. Absolutely for Newry, and they've got a number of more experienced players, but again, it's the lack of games. I think for Newry is gonna be their problem, because can they crawl it up there? I think last season you saw actually in some of the big games they won out after a really poor middle spell, but I mean it's trying to potentially strike lightning twice. So again, that's a part of the table which is really interesting, but I mean, the story of this weekend, going to the very top of the table, started on Friday night. The 8 points that Linfield once had at the top of the table have now been diminished. Larne are back top, and it started a great weekend for them with a win on Friday night. I mean, they are unbeaten in countless amount of games, and it's another week where I say it's workmanlike. It just looks like clockwork. They look ferocious without getting into any type of top gear. And I mean, we're sitting here just after the Super Bowl, which some people may be fans of. And I mean, there's something about that Kansas City Chiefs side. They just have a mentality that regardless of the skill of the other team, they just look unnerved in the big moments. And that's what Larne is, completely unnerved with players who can execute.
It looked to be another sort of fairly routine Friday evening victory for Larne, and I'm sure we'll touch upon that particular subject in due course there. But they really have built up an incredible head of steam now. Funnily enough, Peter, I was just thinking of this the other day. The last time I was on your podcast was back at the end of September, and Larne had just lost 1-0 at Loughgall. Little did we know that since then they would go on this epic unbeaten run of 19 league games, I think it is now. So they are right back on top of their game. They're still in the Irish Cup as well, so they're chasing success on a few fronts after their now seemingly annual County Antrim Shield triumph. Lee Bonus and Andy Ryan have been in terrific goal scoring form as well. I've watched them just dismantle Glenavon in the Irish Cup a couple of weeks ago. I suppose when people say, what has the onset of full-time football brought to the Irish League, you can say, well, look at the caliber of players that have come into it. And Andy Ryan, in my opinion, is right up there with the best of them. He's been a really terrific signing.
It's funny, like I was thinking about this earlier on today. What can the other teams learn from Larne's success? And Larne have a decent way to go here to 100% seal this title. They're just looking, well, they are officially in the box seat now because they have that pole position. When it comes to points, it's in their hands based on the games that they'll play. But if you're a Linfield fan right now and you're thinking, right, they've brought in some great players from other teams. Some of them have been the young starlet. In comes Lee Bonus. Sometimes it's a player from a lower league side who thinks they can take it to the next level. That's Leroy Miller in a nutshell. And on top of that, I think what's been quite impressive from Larne this season, I'm not going to try and say as if they're some sort of side that doesn't have a huge amount of budget, but I mean, I did think the Fod Soule departure was going to impact them a lot more than it has. I didn't foresee that left wing back was an area where they could improve massively. That's exactly what they have with Levi Ives, but they've just set themselves up where Lee Bonus and Ryan are just this tandem that can torture teams. Yes, there's plenty of tactics, there's plenty of build-up play and a lot of thought that goes into it. But I mean, these two players complement each other so well because they have drive, they have speed. A team shouldn't have two of these players at this level, and Larne do.
Yeah, and if as well, if as a defender, if you're lucky enough to put the shackles on those two, Tiernan will just look over to his bench and bring on Paul O'Neill then as well. So it really is an embarrassment of riches attacking wise. And the great thing about Larne, Peter, is that goals can come from absolutely all over in that team. Look at the players that can break from midfield to score goals, and even you mentioned their left wing back, like Levi Ives. Not only is he a very good defender, look how well he gets forward and puts crosses in, and look at his delivery from set pieces. He's just putting in set pieces there and just saying, "Go on, somebody get on the end of that and head that in." They have goals from all throughout that team, and that's obviously a good recipe for success.
And it comes from this well talked about defensive line, which is obviously the strong base that they're able to push forward. And rarely do you see Larne going behind and having to chase a game. They're able to sit up there and turn the screw. And when you look at some of these other teams around them at the top of the league, or teams that wish they were at the top of the league, some things that have come up recently is that idea of consistency. It's about mentality. And that's probably one of the more underrated traits that this manager team has been able to instill in this Larne side. They were willed on to that championship because that was a history-making championship last year. They could see the light at the end of the tunnel and they're ready to charge. This was different. Everybody, they haven't changed massively in the way they play from last year. Everybody knew Larne are the champions here. We know how dangerous they can be, and everybody was going to take them even more seriously. In fact, probably some teams wanted to say, go back down to where you quote unquote belong. We're the big boys in this league. And they could have taken their foot off the pedal as well, but that hasn't happened. Perhaps maybe there was a bit of that at the start of the season where they had some of these results. The fact that they have rarely slipped up, they've rarely let other teams get one on them. I mean, it's truly one of the best qualities of that team, and I think the management team probably don't get enough credit for that.
Yeah, just they've been absolutely relentless. And I mean, you don't get any sort of sense from the management team of resting on their laurels and saying, oh, look, we have a phenomenally strong squad there. We'll settle for that there. Always looking to recruit players, always busy in transfer windows. What they have done, they have done it so well, Lauren. They are hugely impressive in the way they've gone about this entire project. And of course, Peter, the one thing that they do have this year, which they didn't have this time last year, they have the experience behind them of having won a title, which they hadn't at this stage last year. So again, all that would stand them in good stead. I would have to make them big favourites now, particularly Linfield maybe just having hit a wee bit of a sticky spell as well. But having seen Larne a couple of times recently and seen the sort of football they're playing and the way that they're knocking about, I would have to make Larne strong favourites from this position.
I've said it over the past probably well over a month now. Linfield have creaked. They have been creaking, and that result against Dungannon was the time where finally broke, and they were able to bounce back in the Irish Cup. Not particularly in impressive fashion, but a win's a win. Sometimes you need that. And I mean, there was all this talk in the media of frustrations around the pitch at Windsor, and now it was time for Linfield to go on this big tour, a selection of away games where they were going to play a proper football on proper pitches. And they take on a Glenavon side, and they did something which they just could not afford to do. They let it slip, and they let it slip twice. They had the lead early on. They didn't keep it. Then they pushed on, got a late goal, and even then, they couldn't hold on. That must have been such a gut punch for those Linfield fans leaving Mourneview Park. And I'm sure they're sitting there going, just knowing we've let ourselves down massively today.
Yeah, it was a very un-Linfield like end to a game. Normally there would be very few teams better at seeing a game out from that sort of position there. So they will feel very disappointed, particularly the defeat against Dungannon, which you mentioned, and then two more points dropped on Saturday. Those that on its own would be bad enough, but whenever your other rivals in Larne and Cliftonville are just banging form at the minute, it's a particularly bad time to have that sort of slip up. I think Linfield know with absolutely no disrespect to Dungannon and Glenavon, Linfield will know they shouldn't be dropping those sort of points if they're going to challenge for yet another league title. I mean, they took the lead very early on Saturday through Stephen Fallon, who is a player who I think really adds something to that Linfield midfield, but he just hasn't been able to get an injury-free run of games over the past couple of seasons. If he can stay fit, it will certainly add something to David Healy's squad for the run-in.
Well, you see the players that they are bringing on there on Saturday. They've done them a great job, but you know you're relying on Reesenet. Archer came on late there. Braden Graham's coming on. I mean, these are all players with great potential in their own right, but I mean that's a lot of pressure on these young shoulders to get them there, and they're twinning that with players with a huge amount of experience as well, relying on them to have the juice to get them there. Chris Shields playing in defence near the end, and some teams like Newry, I said, are running out of games. For the past few weeks, it's felt like Linfield are just trying to get across the line, hoping that this cushion that they had would get them there till the end, and clearly that's now gone, that's now over, and it's time for them to go on the attack if they can, and not let slip at the back. I mean, it puts even more pressure. We thought these were going to be big games anyway, but from a Linfield perspective, these games against the other rivals there are going to be even bigger, because it's not something that they have thrived in over the past 2 years. We've talked about that a lot. They did well at the start of the season, but they're going to have to take that to another level.
Obviously, they weren't quite as active in the January transfer window as a lot of people maybe anticipated they might be. But then we all know how difficult it is to get the right player in January when they're still in the middle of their contract, maybe with their current club. I would imagine David's looking to get senior players like Stephen Fallon and Chris Shields. You know, I would imagine he's delighted to get those type of players back to bolster his squad, because it's been remarkable there. You did mention it. It's been remarkable to look at Linfield team sheets this season and see the bench filled so often with youngsters, albeit very talented ones. But as you say, it's asking an awful lot for those youngsters to come on and turn games, and they've had to do that as well, because whereas Larne and Cliftonville have maybe been sort of, to an extent, have been steamrolling opponents, Linfield have just been sort of grinding out results. You know, it's all a bit, even when you watch the three teams that I've mentioned there play, you know, Larne and Cliftonville, it's fast flowing football. Linfield, anytime I ever watch them, I find that it's a wee bit more sort of clunky and laboured at times. The build-up play, it's not just as incisive maybe as Larne and Cliftonville, but of course Linfield always have that tremendous trait of being able to keep going and grind out results often late on. Although the irony of that is, of course, then that came back to bite them on Saturday at Mornview.
Well, they have had that, but one thing they've also had this season is an inability to keep out plenty of goals. I mean, 30 goals conceded this year. You compare it to the teams around them, and it's very much a three right now. Like, you look at it, it's almost a 20 points difference between third and fourth, as if we didn't know that was going to be our top three. That's pretty much sealed and delivered. It's just a clear indicator of where they're letting themselves down. Cliftonville have scored more and conceded less, and they're just 2 points behind them. So yes, Linfield have been able to win out consistently, especially when they're not playing well. But we talk about Larne not going up through the gears. If Larne are only winning in third gear, sometimes Linfield are just scraping through and they've barely got out of first, and it's based on some individual brilliance. I think it's clear. Like, there's Linfield fans screaming at the podcast right now, and they're just saying, look at the players we've missed or had to do without. And last year, Larne did well to not have injuries to big players. They've had a bit of that this year, but Cooper was that outlet so much for this side, and they just don't have a like-for-like replacement for him. And then when you take that cog out of their side, they are just not as dynamic as they want to be and could be, and I think that's going to be the thing that's let them down. I don't know where you'd find them anyway, but you're not going to have many Joel Coopers sitting there in reserve, and I'm sure they'll be keen to see the likes of Annette or a McBrien. I know they're different players, ever so slightly, to fill that role, but we're talking about the season 2023-2024, and right now that's just not where they are. And here's the thing with Linfield, they've been there, done that, so even by the fact that they're only a point behind here, so they're hardly out and away, but they're the side that's kind of cantering along, and Larne are speeding past, and you're thinking, how's it going to keep going? So again, it's tightening up those things, because you look at their back line, you think it should be better. Time and time again, it's the last minute, and they don't follow up, and it's a bit of luck comes off the post, Prendergast to knock it in, but it's tight and it's nervy, and perhaps the fact that now Linfield can go on the attack here might suit them a bit better, because they've had this position of don't let Larne into it, and now that they have, maybe that switch can help them.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you're absolutely right there. Defensively, it's a very Linfield-like statistic there, to 32 goals conceded. I mean, the absolute bedrock of so many of those Linfield title successes has been this virtually impenetrable defence, and that for some reason just does not seem to be the case this year. You look at the number of goals there. Larne conceded 16, Cliftonville 18. You know, any title success is usually based around a solid defensive performance, and Linfield are certainly, just possibly lacking a wee bit compared with other Linfield title winning sides. Again, you'd be absolutely foolish to rule them out at this stage. You would never, ever rule Linfield out until it's mathematically impossible. But it's just, they seem to be having to work that wee bit harder than either Larne or Cliftonville are having to do. It just results and performances just seem to be coming more naturally at the moment for Larne and Cliftonville.
I mean, last year they only conceded 27 all season in the league, so they've already conceded more than that. But look, they're still here, they're still in it, and they are seeing players like Chris Shields come back into the team, and perhaps all that changing around where they've got a set team, then they fall away. But I mean, those two results are concerning, to get the 1 point out of the potential 6 that they kind of would like and need. They've given up 5 points there in 2 weeks, so Lawrence ahead of them, and they'll want to catch them. But here comes Cliftonville as well, snapping at the heels, and gave up points themselves. Or maybe you could look at it that way on Tuesday against Glentoran. Glentoran ran away on Tuesday night to a 2-0 lead at halftime, and then they're pulled back by Cliftonville. Another late show, and perhaps they'll use that, and I guess they did, moving on to that game against Coleraine, to Another late goal pushes them on. I mean, those are the moments if you're going to hang around that you need. And I don't know if we're going to ever so slightly reflect on that Tuesday night game at the Oval. Was it all Glentoran falling away, or was it Cliftonville showing their hunger to fight till the very last second? Because, I mean, we know they've done a lot of those late goals against Newry and others over the past few weeks, but they've kind of done it all season.
Yeah, there's been quite a few of those. There's been maybe 5 or 6 occasions, I think, Peter, where Cliftonville have scored stoppage time goals. And again, those are contributing to maybe turning a defeat into a draw or a draw into a win. So, I mean, until the final whistle goes, you have to keep going. And I would say Jim Magilton, while probably maybe disappointed that it has taken them to score so many late goals, he will be absolutely thrilled at how they have stuck to the task and stayed in those games and produced those late goals, because who knows come the end of the season how important those goals could be. It's strange just because a few weeks ago we were talking about the 2 horse title race of Linfield and Larne. Well, the 2 horse race now has 3 horses in it, because as far as I'm concerned, Clifton were very much involved in the title race now.
Absolutely massively. Like, they've got themselves in the race here. Like, I feel like a lot of people thought they're hanging around, but eventually at some point they're going to fall away, and that could happen very, very easily. We just saw Linfield 2 bad weeks, and you can see a 5 point slip. And look, if we're talking about Linfield not having a lot of space to maneuver and mistakes to potentially be made, Cliftonville are the team that are in third out of this pack, and they've got 3 points just to get even with Larne. But with 10 games to go, it's still somewhat in their hands because they can take on Larne. And I mean, that's all they need to do right now is focus on it, game at a time. And at this time of the season, it is all about big time players. It's all about those big moments. And they didn't need a last minute goal on Saturday against Coleraine because they just choked Coleraine out. They did it with style and pizzazz. And I mean, they look like they have no fear. Are they completely mistake free? Absolutely not. But I mean, you can see it. There is totally a path to the championship here, and they've been here before, let's be fair, and this is the time where it's been make or break. Unfortunately, it's been break every single time, but it's a different season, it's a different year, and if they're going to drag themselves to what would be a miraculous Gibson Cup, I think Ronan Hale is going to be a key man in this. I've talked about how Levi Ives, I think, is a strong contender to be Ulster Player of the Year. Lots of people, despite the fact he was out for a couple of weeks through injury, a lot of people are calling for Hale because of just how dynamic he is and how many goals he scored, particularly recently. They're absolutely not a one-man team, but I mean, he just adds so much gas to this team that this makes them a bit like the whole bonus Ryan connection. Sometimes he is just that extra bit of spice that makes them unplayable and creates space for other players. Time and time again, it's often him that doesn't need any players to do the business. He can do it all by himself.
Yeah, Ronan Hale's return from injury could scarcely have been any better timed for Cliftonville. Obviously, the early weeks, the early months of the season, Ben Wilson was grabbing a lot of the headlines, and rightly so. His performances and his goal scoring was terrific. But once Heel came back from injury and got himself match fit, it was like adding an extra dimension to the Cliftonville attack. Honestly, Peter, I've been amazed at how little respect Cliftonville seem to have been given for what they've achieved this season. 13 games unbeaten as well. I mean, we talked about Larne and their epic run there. Cliftonville are unbeaten, 13 league games, and they've just really catapulted themselves right into the title race, which is terrific to see. Like Jim Magilton and Jared Little, well, they certainly weren't flavour of the month with a lot of Reds fans when they were appointed, but they've responded in the only way that a management team can, and that's by putting out a team which gets results in the pitch. The one thing that always sort of strikes me about when I've spoken to Jim Magilton this season, he just seems to be really relaxed about the whole thing. I think probably Jim maybe come in with a reputation. People thought, oh, he'll be a bit fiery here. But anytime I've interviewed him, he comes across as just being really relaxed and is really enjoying working with that group of players. Now, of course, it's easy for a manager to be like that when his team's winning. as you would know, Peter, as well as I do, when you're interviewing a manager whose team has lost, it can be a bit like pulling teeth. But Jim has certainly had plenty to smile about this season. You know, it's the style that Clifton will play with that impresses me as well. They play with a real swagger and players who are so comfortable on the ball. I have to say, I was honestly waiting on Cliftonville's challenge maybe starting to crumble a wee bit after the January transfer window when they lost Chris Gallagher and Luke Turner. But of course, the plus side of the Turner deal was that they were able to strike a deal with St. Pat's Athletic to make David Odumosu's transfer permanent. And I think that any team with aspirations to challenge for honours needs a goalkeeper of that sort of calibre. I've been really impressed with him.
That's not been an issue for them, has it? He's slotted in and they're kind of going, we don't need to worry about that right now. We've got our keeper who looks to be athletic, solid shot stopper, and looks really confident. I went into the season thinking that actually, despite all their attacking play, that I thought their defence was going to let them down a bit. That just hasn't been the case, and it has been a bit of just a lot of players have stepped up to the mark. Casey being one of them. He's scoring goals at the top, being a mean defender at the back. You know, he was a player. It wasn't really clear where he was going to fit into this side. And as a part of this defence, that's his role right now. But I mean, he's equally adept as being a bit of a destroyer in that midfield. And like, they lose Turner and they could have lost others, but so far it hasn't hurt them. I think Casey getting that red card, could that open the door ever so slightly for their next game? You know, they don't want to regret that. But Gallagher gone, Jay Gordon's fit in. I mean, they have players that can hurt you, and they look like they're all working hard, playing for each other. They do have people coming off the bench. I mean, they have as much a chance as anybody, and I think we're all waiting for these games between all three of these top sides. Just to touch on Coleraine, I mean, 4-1, they're just going to have to take these results and try and get better, but it's not going to happen overnight. They'll be happy that McGonigal, I guess, is getting a goal here. And they looked at sharp in phases. The big thing for me, if I was a Coleraine fan, we still haven't got this takeover rubber stamp. There's reports now in the paper that what they believed was going to be the finances put forward for the takeover is now being reduced now to 1.2 million, which according to journalists is not what they expected. People are saying that undervalues the club. When you kind of thought, right, Coleraine, batten down the hatches and we'll wait for the summer when everything's going to be clear of what we're going to do. There's still a bit of uncertainty around this club.
Yeah, very much so. Just on the pitch, first of all, I suppose, Peter, if anything summed up Colerane's current plight, it was that chaotic first goal that they conceded at Solitude on Saturday. I mean, you just can't legislate for Rory Brown losing his footing like that, but it's certainly been a fairly difficult introduction for him since he arrived from Glenavon. I always think it's difficult for a goalkeeper to move to a new team in mid-season because almost immediately you have to strike up a relationship with a group of defenders in front of him who've been used to playing with a different goalkeeper behind them. I mean, it doesn't help as well when you're in a side that's scratching for form. You know, Oran pursued that transfer of Rory Brown very strongly, and Gary Hamilton often used to wax lyrical at Glenavon about how good a goalkeeper he is. So I'm sure once things settle, he'll come good. As for the takeover business, no one will convince me, Peter, that all that wrangling in the background over the takeover of the club hasn't transferred itself to matters in the pitch. You know, in my mind, Coleraine of the personnel to be doing a lot better than they have this season. It's unusual now to see Coleraine scrambling for a place in the top six, which in recent seasons would have been absolutely nailed on. I suppose it doesn't matter how good a manager you are, how good a squad you have. If that squad is decimated by injuries, as they have been, it's going to have an impact. You know, slowly but surely, Coleraine are starting to get those players back. And I'm talking about players who are the spine of their team. You know, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been sitting waiting for Coleraine's results to start improving with these players coming back. But they haven't really done so far. I mean, they'll certainly be looking for a bit of a revival in the closing stages of this season because they won't want to be entering this new era for the club on the back of a really disappointing campaign this time out.
Well, there's also concerns, reports I can read in the papers about losses that the club has made. And I mean, we're only a year removed from last January where we're talking about the idea of clubs tightening their belts, and Coleraine looked to be pushing forward and six-figure losses sound quite scary, I guess, when there's talks of maybe going full-time. There's reports that that doesn't look like it is going to be on the cards, and we could see more of a three-quarter model up there. So, I mean, the more information we are getting via some elements in the media, what we know seems to be more foggier than ever. So, I mean, Coleraine have kind of been a story that we'll bounce back to again and again. And between now and the end of the season, they'll concentrate about stuff on the pitch, but there's clearly so much else going on off of it. Elsewhere in that battle for one of the places in this European playoff, I think we all know that Glentoran and Crusaders are nailed on to be in those playoffs no matter what. But after, as we said on Tuesday, Glentoran going 2-0 up at home, they once again threw it away on Saturday to Carrick Rangers. And I mean, this Carrick team have had the Glens number this season, and it's another set of drop points. Like that's hard to take again if you're a Glens fan. You know, Warren Feeney's coming out talking about the mentality of his team and his players. When is Glentoran going to turn the ship around, I guess?
I was at the Glentoran Carrick match on Saturday, and it was honestly, it was like watching a rerun of that midweek game against Cliftonville. Glentoran 2-0 up at half time, absolutely coasting. Carrick had done absolutely nothing, Peter, in the first half. Stuart King admitted to me afterwards that he had set his team up wrongly in the first period. They did absolutely nothing. Danny Gibson, just a totally isolated figure up there on his own. They just could not get anybody up to support him. And I remember chatting at half time to Alex Mills, the journalist who was covering the match. He was sitting beside me in the press box, and I said to him, Alex, I don't think the Glens will let a 2-goal lead slip today. So again, that shows how much I know. Once Carrick got back into it, and it was an absolutely terrific goal from Andy Mitchell, a really, really fabulous strike. You could sort of sense Glentoran losing their composure, and then Curtis Allen, the ace predator that he is, managed to bundle home the equaliser. And Carrick actually finished the game really strongly, and they really have done a number on Glentoran this season. That's 7 points out of the 3 league meetings against Glentoran. Again, not surprisingly, Warren was very crestfallen at the end, bemoaning the mentality of his players. I asked him whether a manager can actually do anything to change the mentality of his players, or whether it will actually require him to change the players completely. And he said that he's always looking at ways to strengthen his squad, but the demands that players are making, the wage demands, he says, are absolutely scary. You know, he says there are good players in England, pointing to the likes of David Fisher as an example, but the wages that they're asking for are prohibitive, really. It's been a disappointing season for Glentoran, but it's worth remembering that Warren inherited a squad that had just finished third under Rodney McAree and had won the European playoffs. So you can understand why a lot of Glens fans have felt very underwhelmed about what's happened this season.
They weren't going to get into the top 3 over the past few weeks. You know, they have 2 home games. They'll have want to have kind of puffed their chest out and get a result against Cliftonville, but I guess last minute goals like that are going to happen, and they're going to lose it against good teams. But to do it again to Carrick Rangers, that's the thing. You want to see signs that the team is progressing and they're building for next year, not making these mental mistakes. You know, we always talk about teams having this aura about them, and I'm sure if you're a Glentoran fan, you're thinking we have good players and a good team, and we can see them do so well against the top sides and then just not keep together for 90 minutes. You look elsewhere about not keeping together for 90 minutes. They are in Coleraine-esque doldrums right now. It's been a weird week, I imagine. If you're a Crusaders fan, you're getting to grips with the idea that Baxter's moving on. It does seem like this, you've mentioned Klopp in the papers during the week, this Klopp-esque kind of goodbye, similar to Glentoran. I mean, all the games between now and the end of the season is about building momentum. They don't have the cup, but they'll be wanting to settle themselves for this European playoff race, and they also want to set themselves up for next season. It's a bit like the game there in Lurgan, late on between these two, and I guess if you're a Crusaders fan, you're saying, we fought back, we got back, we got a point. Maybe Ben Kennedy's back, I don't know, but there's not really a huge amount of delight to be taken from this game. This was not a bounce back game for the Crews.
No, obviously, there's the end of an era is back at Seaview with Stephen Baxter stepping down. And the thing that will probably be immediately apparent to whoever succeeds him is that the squad is going to need a fairly drastic overhaul over the next season or a couple of seasons. With a lot of players, in the twilights of their careers, the twilights of some very successful careers, but I suppose the years catch up with everyone, don't they? There's already some suggestion of some big hitters possibly retiring. A new manager might be keen to move on some of the others as well, and in their pump, Peter, as you will have witnessed yourself, Crusaders were a terrific side, virtually unplayable when those players were at the peak of their powers. But as I say, the years catch up with everyone, and it'll certainly be the start of a new era for a new manager, and he'll have a difficult job ahead of him. That'll probably become even more difficult if Crusaders don't have European money to back them up, as they have done for so many years under Stephen Baxter. They qualified for Europe countless times, and the finance that brought with them. Crusaders' problem, I suppose, like Coleraine, is that they're now out of the Irish Cup, and they're obviously not going to qualify for Europe automatically via their league position. So their only avenue now is the European playoffs, and as we know, anything can happen in those one-off games. Peter, a team could lose to a team who finished several places and maybe 20 points behind them in the league table.
It's one of those players. It's being somewhat wink wink nudge nudge reported that this could be the final few games of Paul Heatley's career, at least in a Crusaders shirt. Probably, I'm sure he could play for Crusaders as long as he wants there. So that would be a big loss, regardless of what kind of Paul Heatley you would have in the season 24-25. But it is an encapsulation a bit of Dungannon season, where they they can attack, they can throw bodies at you, they can catch you, they're not scared to go forward and get a goal. But they do also have a habit of letting teams come at them and come onto them. And just once they look to have scored a late winner through Joe Moore, it's pretty much from the kickoff. They let Crusaders come back, and Ben Kennedy's in there for the second goal. Part of the thing I want to know is why Ben Kennedy was so annoyed that he went and celebrated in front of the Dungannon bench for the first goal. I don't know. That's just his, wherever he gets his energy and his fuel. Will he even be a part of this Crusader side next season? So look, there's some sharp bits. You're seeing young players being put on the pitch there for Crusaders, but I look at this game and I feel like I learned nothing about either of these teams. It's that one-off game, and here, you never know. It could be a repeat of what we see later on when it comes to the European playoffs. But right now, we're sitting there, as we said, Crusaders are overall good, but elsewhere we have Coleraine back in the sixth position, and then it's all just so close between Carrick and Glenavon, and Dungannon are the team that's furthest out, with Loughgall in there as well. So plenty of games he played, and plenty still on the line. So
just on that subject about Dungannon there, they had started the season quite slowly, hadn't they? And a lot of people thought that they might be in that relegation shake-up, possibly them, Ballymena and Newry for the bottom two places. But even Peter, even early on in the season, having watched Dungannon a couple of times, I always felt that the Swifts would pull away from danger. And the main reason I had that belief is that I always felt there were goals in that Dungannon team, which I didn't feel even from early on in the season. I didn't feel that about Ballymena or Newry. If you look at it now, I think Dungannon have scored almost 30 more goals than Newry or Ballymena, and their goal difference is almost worth an extra point to them because it's a country mile better than Ballymena's or Newry's. They've coped quite well, Dungannon, with the injury to Matty Lusty, who had been scoring goals for fun during his loan spell from Larne. They've still managed to keep scoring. And, there is a genuine goal threat in that team. Andrew Mitchell popping up with his first goal since he's returned there. Certainly a good weekend if your name is Andrew Mitchell in the Irish League, wasn't it? I think I've been particularly impressed. One player that has really caught my eye this season at Dungannon, the contribution that's been made by Keelan Dillon. Even if you just watch the highlights each week, Peter, just look how often a Dungannon chance comes about from a through ball or a set piece delivery by him. I remember being impressed by Keelan Dillon when he was at Warrenpoint, and then obviously when Warrenpoint were relegated, he sort of, he disappeared under the radar for a bit, but Rodney McAree clearly remembered him from Rodney's spell of coaching at Warrenpoint, and brought him back in the summer, and I think he's been a terrific signing for them.
He's a great man to pivot in the center of the pitch and then find a player out wide. Like that's really what his contribution is. He's mean in the tackle, but his distribution on the ground is excellent, and his vision to find those players. They just know if they push forward, he's likely to find them. And it is the difference in this season and last. It's not. He's scored a few goals himself, but it's not always that direct. It's the ball before the ball that gets the goal. And I know Dungannon have been poor over the past few years, but last year they only scored 28. They've already scored 47 this year. That is the 5th highest amount of goals scored in the league. That's the difference. It's just been those moments where they take the lead and then they let Linfield come back, or they let Crusaders back in their last minute. And that can be the difference between 28 points and maybe 32, 34, where they would be in their 6th. Coleraine's on 32 points. So again, this is the interesting point. We have such a long stretch where pretty much all we have now, that's your foundation, and it's all about form to see if it can get you through to wherever you want to be. And I think this season's going to keep going pretty much to the final day. I said I was going to talk about it, so let's slot it in here. Dean Smith, Loughgall manager, is talking about Friday nights again. He maybe suggested that there should be a limit, highlighting the idea that ultimately there is a majority part-time teams, and we all know that Larne love the Friday nights. We've talked about this podcast before. Does it give them advantage or not? It's funny because the one time that Larne has lost this season was on a Tuesday night to Loughgall, so again, there's always going to be examples one way or the other. It's always good to bring these topics back up, especially when managers are bringing it to the fore. From your experience, what do you think? Do you think this idea of maybe some sort of cap to make it quote unquote more fair for teams is the right idea, or is it maybe an overreach if it was to be proposed?
I suppose, Peter, you can look at that argument from both sides, can't you? I mean, Larne will perhaps say that they're maximising attendances by playing games away from the normal Saturday afternoon, which maybe potentially opens up a greater audience of spectators. A lot of people have so many other competing interests on a Saturday afternoon. I suppose the counter argument, the critics will say it's given Larne an advantage of being fresh and well prepared physically against a team whose players have been working all day. I remember last season I bumped into an Irish League player in the course of his day job. It was a job which necessitated very early morning starts. Like I think I bumped into this player about 7:30 in the morning or something like that, and he told me he'd been up since about 4 and had started work about 5. His job then involved he would finish around lunchtime or early afternoon. So I asked him, what do you do, for example, in the case of a day where he had a midweek away match or that evening or something like that? And he said it was a case of basically coming home from work and trying to get his head down for an hour's sleep in the afternoon, and then just about time to get a bite to eat and then travel to the match. And all I could think of when he was telling me this was, while this guy's rushing around at his work, was that maybe the guy that he would be marking, like a full-time opponent of the team that he was playing against, maybe the guy that he's marking, he's maybe spent all day, lying on a bench getting a massage or something like that there. It's important to stress as well, Larne are doing absolutely nothing wrong by playing these games on a Friday night. The rules are there which enable any club to switch a home game, and provided they give the league the requisite period of notice, there's nothing the away team can do about it. It's, when I think about it now, Peter, just the way things have moved on, it's a world away from something I remember from years ago. And one night I just happened to be down at the Ballymena Showgrounds picking something up or something like that, and I was getting out of my car in the car park, and this car sped into the car park and pulled up beside me, and a Ballymena player from that time was getting out of the car like really hurriedly. And we were just sort of chatting very briefly, and he says to me, I says, look, I'm sorry, Stephen, I've got to go here. I'm late for training, and the boss will kill me. So this fella was in his, if you imagine this fella in his full work gear. And when he opened the boot of his car, there were 2 bags in the boot of the car. His work bag full of tools, and his bag containing his training kit. So like he had obviously packed everything that morning, knowing that when he left for work, he wouldn't be back home until after he'd finished training. To me, that was just sort of part and parcel of the life of a part-time Irish League footballer, fitting football in and around your day job. Now you've players getting, the best of sports science and nutrition and video analysis sessions and things like that. So it's certainly been a major shift in the landscape.
Clearly, if you go to Larne and they're the team that always gets the example because they're so fervent with their use of Friday night games, they see that as their way to build up their audience, their crowd. They make a tradition out of that. People are only pointing it out as an idea. That's an advantage because of their success that they've had on Friday evenings. Would they have had the same success on Saturday afternoons? We don't know because we just haven't had that same sample size with them playing at home on Saturday afternoons. There's obviously something to it, but I think, as I've said here before, without going straight to the league and asking them directly and if they would even be this honest, I think my gut tells me that it's clear that the league goes, those teams, if they do have the advantage, then that's due to their own success. And I mean, it's all about the fan experience. And we've heard on this podcast Jared Lawler saying if there could be a game every night of the week, he would want that, as broadcast in a way. So the idea of evening games is not going to go away. And yes, it may be difficult, but look, plenty of teams right now are going to be playing Saturday to Tuesday, bit between now and the end of the season. So it's just, it comes and it goes, and maybe a limit, but then who's to say the league might not move towards something that's almost a majority Friday night? Could that be the new Saturday at 3 o'clock? We don't know. It's definitely something that will creep up again and again. I mean, here we are, another week full of fixtures, and we don't really get into what goes on the Tuesday. We've already said Loughgall, Newry. I mean, it's so hard to tell because it feels like Loughgall haven't been, due to the cup and everything else, like they haven't been playing week in and week out. Could they get caught by Newry? We'll just have to see. I think Loughgall should have the advantage there, but I mean, this is a game that was moved from earlier on in the year. If you're Newry, I mean, you're playing with a certain different energy. They're playing better away from home, so I mean, this could be the coming out game for them. Going to the games that are ahead of us. Friday night, it's Coleraine against Linfield. They're going to have to go up to the Coleraine Showgrounds. I mean, Coleraine aren't in a great run. Linfield have to win this, but it's always a tricky tie, these two.
Particularly, the onus will be on Linfield to try and get a win from this game. Coleraine obviously struggling very badly for form. Had it not been for those two disappointing results for Linfield, which we talked about earlier there, you would probably be going up there, David Healy. Had they been coming off the bag of two wins there, you'd be going up. Possibly David might be saying, well, a draw here. Obviously, he would want to win the game, but a draw wouldn't be the end of the world. Now, just given the shift at the top of the table in recent weeks, Linfield are going to have to keep pace now with the Larne juggernaut, and really Linfield, I think, are going to have to go for that and try and get the 3 points.
100%, they're going to have to go start strong. They don't want to have that. They did that ultimately against Glenavon, but it's they're going to get out, not let the cold set in and the panic set in. Because ultimately Coleraine do have players, and they've always had players, but particularly right now, McGonagall's getting up and running. They still have Shevlin, McKendry, and the like. So I think the onus is on Linfield to score there and score early and keep the pressure up. Similar in the way that Cliftonville handled that at home. I'm going to say Linfield are going to win this, but I'm going to say 2-1, tighter than most Blue Men would like it to be. What do we call this? The Ballymena against Larne up at the Ballymena Showground. Was it? I think
the Shames Hill Derby.
Slemish skirmish. That's what it is. The Shames Hill. That's the one. I mean, Ballymena in this fixture at the Showgrounds did hold Larne to a 0-0 draw. It was the first kind of sign that Ballymena are getting it together, and it was their first real getting one over on one of the top sides in the league. I mean, they would take that again. These games are considered 0 points with the hope of getting anything. Can they do it again? I think this is a different Larne side, but, that pitch, Saturday afternoon, you never know.
Well, I suppose, Peter, that's the proverbial free hit, isn't it, for Ballymena? If there's such a thing in this league, I don't think anyone will expect them to get a result against Larne. And then again, no one expected Ballymena to get a result against Larne the last time, and they battled their way to a really hard fought scoreless draw. On the day when, from memory, they could actually have pinched to win Ballymena that day. I think it was Noah Stewart had a header ruled out for offside. But I remember that day, Tiernan was extremely disappointed with Larne's performance that day. They just didn't turn up that day, and you know he was bemoaning 2 points dropped that day. Jim Irvin was delighted at getting an unexpected point. Can Ballymena do it again? It's the position has probably changed slightly, and that Larne are in just such an incredible run of form. You would have to make Larne big favourites for this one, but obviously I think any Ballymena fan would be delighted if they could add to their points tally from this one.
I can't see it. I think it's a case of maybe it isn't the situation where Larne are thumping this team, particularly being away from home, but I mean they should have the ability and the skill. I guess this is what they said last time, but I mean I think it's two very different teams from that last situation, and I think they will get the goals to win. I'm gonna say 2-0. I mean, elsewhere, you've got some really interesting games. Cliftonville need to keep up the pressure. They host Glenavon, fresh off getting that point against Linfield. Glenavon, I think, have struggled on some of these plastic pitches this year, and the way Cliftonville have been playing, it reminds me a bit of that Irish Cup tie between Glenavon and Larne, and maybe Casey's got to be an issue, but Glenavon were able to sneak the draw. I don't think they'll get a result here. I think Cliftonville will win 3-0.
Cliftonville have been phenomenally strong, haven't they? At Solitude, particularly. They just scarcely concede goals at Solitude. Don't I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if Glenavon can get a result there, Peter. I mean, you look at, I mentioned earlier on about that run of form shortly after Stephen McDonald took over. Obviously, it's been very hard for them to maintain that sort of level. But he's been very active in the January transfer market. He's tapped into the Republic of Ireland market using contacts and players that he knows there. So they will be looking to finish strongly. They're still on the fringes of battling for the top six as well, which would be a phenomenal outcome given how poorly they started the season. And I spoke to Stephen after the Irish Cup game at Larne, and as extraordinary as this sounds, Peter, when you look at the result when they lost 5-0, the first half hour of that game, Glenavon were terrific. They really put it up to Larne, but I think sort of just kind of once the Bonus and Ryan show took over there, they were just blown away. But Stephen was stressing that, I said to him, out of the cup, and what is the focus on now for Glenavon between now and the end of the season? He said he just wants to try and keep improving, and he's obviously sort of starting to think very strongly already at this season about who might stay, who might go next season. So again, there's still plenty for Glenavon to play for, but I just can't see them upsetting the apple cart at Cliftonville.
Could this be a big week for Newry? Because if they want to get a result against the top six side, away at the Oval sounds like a good place to do it. Could they parlay the game against Loughgall and then finish it off with a game against Glentoran? I mean, sometimes I think of games for Glentoran that it's a banana skin they want to avoid, and sometimes for Glentoran they just look at it and think that banana skin is just too enticing to not to fall on or slip on. I mean, they've broadly avoided a couple of them this year, the likes of Anna in the Cup. They haven't really had that massive disaster moment, I would say, as Glentoran fans sit there and scream at their pod. But I mean, could this be McDonagh, McGovern? I know they didn't start on Friday night, but I mean, they could do a number here. And I guess if you're in Newry, we talk about a free hit with Ballymena. This could be a free hit, and could it be more of a downhill free hit? I mean, it's not totally uphill here. They could catch them, and the way Newry City are set up to score goals, it feels like they could do a carrick here. But again, this is a Glentoran team that has Junior, Fisher, Bobby Burns is scoring goals once again. Again, what a side they could have if only Bobby Burns could stay fit consistently throughout the season. Do they lack motivation? I don't know. I am going to say 1-1 for this.
Ooh, I mean, it couldn't happen for a third time, could it, Peter? Glentoran couldn't blow a lead for a third game in a row. I think on this occasion, if Glentoran get in front, I would say it'll be very difficult for Newry to get anything out of. I think Newry's best hope in this one will be keeping it tight. Maybe if they can pinch the opening goal, maybe give them something to hold on to. But I would have to fancy Glentoran to get back to winning ways in this one.
It's so hard to tell with Loughgall because I was saying about all the games that they haven't been playing and we don't know how to do against Newry. But I mean, it's 2 games in a week at Lakeview Park, but it's Crusaders coming to town. And, you know, I always talk about hot hands on this podcast, and Crusaders right now, theirs is ice cold. What kind of team will they have? I mean, they've had a difficult time against Loughgall this year. They let a draw slip away at home, and then they're just able to squeeze a win last minute thanks to Paul Heatley doing Paul Heatley things late on. I mean, it's a difficult one here, and I think I'm actually going to back Loughgall. I think they're going to win this 1-0, and I keep feeling as though Loughgall are just going to, down tools feels a bit over the top, but they're just going to go, oh, we did it, that's amazing, it's all good, and they're just gonna relax, and it's what people might say, they're gonna be on the beaches, but I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know why I think it's gonna happen here. And if Loughgall show the fight that they did against Larne at home, I can't see why not. They wouldn't win out here because Crusaders are lacking goals and they are leaking them as well. So
Yeah, I mean, I think probably with Loughgall, that defeat at Larne last week, I mean, it's not going to be the sort of result really that defines Loughgall's season. I mean, I've said it before, they've been terrific. They're already within touching distance of securing their first target, which was to stay in this division. I mean, when you look at the league table, they're right there in the shake-up, potentially to finish in the top six as well. I mean, I think if that was to happen, Peter, there would be a very strong argument for Dean Smith to be in the running for manager of the year, in my opinion. I think he's done a terrific job there.
yeah, excellent stuff from him this year. And will he keep that team together? How much will he go? And I think for them, until they're mathematically nailed on, safe and away from 11th, they will keep on going and look, enjoy the season that they have. But I there's just, until Crusaders can turn it around, I think Loughgall will be a dangerous proposition for them. Carrick, Dungannon, I mean, this is the real wannabe top six mire. You would say that Taylor's Avenue's been difficult for Carrick. So do you squeeze, like, Dungannon are getting the goals? I'm back in Dungannon here 2-1.
Ooh, interesting, interesting. I mean, whenever I interviewed Stuarty on Saturday, and I asked him the question about is top six something they would, is that now a target that they can aim for? And he answered the question, and at the end, when we finished the interview, he gave me a big hug and he said, "You'll never hear me talking about top six." Now that's publicly, as we know, Peter. What's said by a manager behind closed doors and what he comes out and maybe says in the media, that's two different things. I think now Carrick will look at that fixture list that I've mentioned earlier between now and the split. There really is, an opportunity for them to go and grab something that they would have thought, probably even at the start of this season, they thought that's unachievable. I think there is a real focus there now, something that they can really aim for. It's just, can they shake off this really poor form at Taylor's Avenue? May not do it on this occasion because Dungannon still have plenty to play for. I think this one might well be a draw.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I just going back to the table, like, as much as we're kind of going can Newry, what do Loughgall have to fight for? I mean, Loughgall are still a game behind Coleraine in sixth, and there's only a point difference between them. So Loughgall win that when all games are even. They are in sixth. They're on 34 points, and that's 2 points above Coleraine. That's 3 points off Carrick, 4 points off Glenavon. We talk about the fact that Glenavon have Cliftonville, Coleraine have Linfield. Loughgall beat the Crews, which would be a big turnaround. I mean, that's 37 points, 5 ahead of Coleraine, and 6 on Carrick, and that's based on the fact that if Carrick don't get a victory there against Dungannon. So a lot on the line there for Carrick. You know, it could be a big slip if they don't turn that around. But yeah, no, I'm going to go for 2-1 Dungannon, because every time I feel like I've backed Carrick at home, it hasn't went their way. So that's our fare, and another great pod. Thank you so much, Mr. Alexander, for joining me here. I know many people would be unknowingly more familiar with your work as the man asking the big questions to managers on more the TV coverage, the TV interviews afterwards. But it's a new thing I'm doing right now. Between now and the end of the season, I've kind of given my thoughts on the topic. For you, if I was to push you and say, who right now, with there being 10 games to go, who do you think's probably the player of the year?
Player of the year. Oh my goodness. There have been so many players who've stood out. There have been so many players at Larne. Players, you mentioned one earlier on there, Levi Ives. There have been so many players as well who have had good spells for clubs. And another player that you mentioned, Ronan Heal. There are so many players at Larne and at Cliftonville, and there have been players who've been terrific as well at Linfield. It quite often goes to attacking players, but the very man that you mentioned earlier on, Peter, who has been terrific at both ends of the pitch for Larne and who has been a really key sign, and Levi Ives would be very well up there in the running, in my opinion, because he's so good at both ends of the pitch. He's so good at his job defensively and getting forward. He basically just adds an extra dimension to Larne's attacking options as well. So I think he's a very strong contender.
Excellent. And I guess I'll just throw it in the mix. Larne, your favourites right now?
I think so, Peter. I think they have, not only are they in the box seat, they have put themselves in the box seat. I think that's the impressive thing about it as well. Just they have come from, I think a lot of people looked at it earlier in the season when Linfield were 7 or 8 points clear, whatever it was. They go, oh, well, Linfield don't let things slip from positions like that. They have to an extent, but I think, to be honest, you have to say more so than Linfield giving anything away. I think Larne have absolutely played themselves right back into the title favourites again. I think they've been really, really terrific. 19 games unbeaten in this league. A run like that, you have to be a good team to do it in this division.
Stephen, an absolute pleasure as always. It has been too long. Hopefully the next time we're chatting Irish League football, well, it won't be too far around the corner. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Peter. Take care.
Not gonna lie, 2 podcasts in a week and all those games, I am a wee bit pooped. I'm kind of looking forward to spending one of these evenings sitting up with my feet up and, I don't know, reading a book or something. But I know I'll just think of some sort of mad concept for next week's pod. If you've joined me twice this week, it's been fun hanging out with you this week. If you have joined me for 2 episodes this week, you do know that if you aren't following me on Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, you should probably do that. Good place to do that. It's pretty easy to find. It's at Kicking Match on all 3 of those platforms. Of course, if you want to keep up to date so that you get the latest edition and you're the first to know about a podcast dropping, you should follow me / subscribe to me on your favorite little podcast platform, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You go to the main page here and you're going to be able to find out a little button to click. It's free, it's easy, and it warms the little cockles of my heart. Fingers crossed the weather will warm up too, but of course one can only dream, can't they? Another fun week ahead, I think. Until next time, I will see you all very soon.